It's on? Yeah. So that's Soumyan and Sahi, one of the cinematographers of the film. I announced your name, but you had not put it. And Shaunak has joined us. Yes. Can you hear me, Shaunak? Or it's still being set up? Okay. Yeah. Hello. Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me, Shaunak?
It's very light. I can't hear anything.
No.
You'll have to speak really loudly. I can, it's very faint.
Okay, just give a moment, please. Yeah. Now, is it better now?
Slightly better. You'll just have to speak a bit loudly, is all.
Okay, yeah. I'll try to, because I'm speaking into a mic for the rest of the audience. So I'll try to speak loudly into the mic. Okay. Yeah. He's not able to hear as clearly.
We can go on. I can hear you somewhat. We can, I think we can manage.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So firstly, Shaunak, thank you very much for sharing your film with us, and congratulations once again from all of us here in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish I could have been there, but and Somo's there, so I don't mind being virtually tuned in.
Yes. Well, we are glad that you could make it at least virtually. Where are you actually right now? Not in Bangalore, but you said you had other screenings to attend to.
Oh, well, at long last, I'm now back in Delhi, where there's also a slew of screenings and so on. So I got back to India a little over a week ago.
Yes. Okay. So, Shaunak, the first question that I'm sure many of us here want to know is how did sort of all that breeds take its first breath? Where, when, and how did it all begin for you?
I think the film started in all earnestness prior to to meeting the brothers. When you live in Delhi, almost everybody is sort of preoccupied with the air, the sheer grayness or the tactile, visceral sort of viscosity of the air that all of us feel, especially in the winters. And I wanted to do something on this kind of gray texture of life that it feels like all of us are suspended in. And alongside that, I was philosophically interested in human non-human relationships. So I was vaguely interested in this kind of abstract triangulation of air, birds, and humans. And it sort of started with this kind of ineffable glow at the back of, like many films often start. And the black kite, the cheel is this kind of if you look at the dystopic picture postcard of Delhi, it's always these gray, monochromatic skies with these tiny black dots peppering the sky. And I once had this, I was sat in a car and I had this distinct impression that I was seeing this one black dot sort of plummeting from the sky. And that's how it began. I literally Googled where do birds that fall off go to. And once you encounter the work of the brothers and you go to that basement, it's just so inherently cinematically riveting. It reminds you of, Tarkovsky and all kinds of cinematic references. So I think that's how it started. And then the film just becomes a kind of a fever dream. It becomes you've sort of jumped off a cliff and you're in free fall. And before you know it, 3 years have gotten over. And essentially, if I had to, at gunpoint, pinpoint a moment when it started, I would say it started with an interest in greenness and thinking about human non-human entanglement in a way.
Yeah. So you mentioned 3 years. You've also said that you filmed it over a period of 3 years,
Yes, I did.
and many things would have changed in the course of those 3 years in the lives of the two brothers and also in the life of our society. There were things happening. And how did that impact the film, and how did that change the story of the film? Because some things couldn't have been predicted. They were really, yeah. So could you share a little
Well,
bit
when
about
the
how
film,
things moved?
of course, I mean, look, the thing is that when you started a non-fiction project, you're anyway sort of, it's a kind of embrace of the radical unscriptedness of the world, right? Where life itself is in plotting action. And what you have to do is basically have really deep concentration and an ability to show up and witness. So the film also, your life becomes a fodder for the film, and the film becomes a kind of raw material for your life, and so on. So all these kind of cross pollinations occur. I see what you're getting at by that question. But essentially, what happened is that when the film began, it was ecological primarily. But as you know, the city of Delhi was going through these really turbulent times, and it felt like the city was on the boil. And the real question was whether one points the camera streetwards, where so much of upheavals were occurring, or one respects the sanctity of the story that you're shooting. And we decided on the latter. So the idea was that even though there might be a lot of chaos on the streets, the brothers themselves are actually not very conventionally political beings. And they would say that the relationship between humans and birds is also political, but it's not like a conventional sort of politics. Now, essentially, therefore, what we realized is that every now and then the outside world would sort of leak into their life, through audio. Like a character goes into the balcony and you hear the distant resonances of a crowd, the murmurations of a crowd, or the characters watching the video of potential violence in the city, and all you hear is the audio. So this sort of a oblique, tangential presence of the macrocosmic social world felt like it was the most honest way to put it in, because one doesn't want to impose an external socio-political lens on it, right? And one has to respect, and it was very subtle, which is why the presence in the film is also very subtle, and it's a kind of, it's in the minor key, right? And in a way, the idea was that even though this is a kind of a epistemic wallpaper of their lives, it's a distant, palpable sort of a texture. And in for them, it's a kind of waxing and waning of the outside world and the inside world. And the idea was to show how they soldier on in with their work with the birds, no matter what happens, literally, right? So in a way, it was like, so the film is a kind of like there are concentric circles of
Yes.
magnitude where we zoom out, right? So we have the very claustrophobic basement, which Somo loved shooting in. Above that, you have the city and the social. Above that, you have the kind of ecological. And there's a broader sort of a thing about the level of climate change, or the planetary per se. And in a way, our everyday, there's a bit in the film Unconnectedly where Saud says that these petty squabbles that we have, these fights, that these minor arguments that the brothers have, when they have a fight when between the two of them when they're mending a machine, they say that in a way it's he says that in a way all of this, by which I assume he means the planetary, is affecting our, like everyday moods, and the most minor petty irritability is connected to broader things, like is symptomatic of a broader ecological malaise. So in a way, one had to keep thinking of these broader bubbles, and that's what I was interested in. And we had to be open to these things to come in and to let it exist in a kind of, in a subtle sort of a oblique way.
Yeah, these concentric circles that you mentioned, I was thinking of them also as layers to the story. There are sort of layers apart from the two main that you have, which is the human beings and the more than human world.
Yes.
And while we are talking about the micro and the macro, we are also taken at extreme close quarters to these more than human beings, and almost made to sort of take cognizance that it's not really the nether world, it's they're there around us all the time. And that sort of coming to terms with that existence, coexistence. I have another question for you about the film and the larger sort of, your philosophy of the film. But let me ask the next question to Somo, as we call him. You mentioned that he loved shooting in the basement, and it was a small space, claustrophobic, I don't know, but small certainly. This is something that we can tell. What were some of the challenges in shooting there at different times of the day and night? And also the challenges of these the extreme close-ups of the birds, where you don't know, very often again in the dark, and you don't know what's going to happen.
I mean, a bit like what Shaunak was saying about multiple layers. In a similar way, the very architecture of the house was something that kind of was almost conceptual. I mean, it kind of lent itself to a conceptual treatment, where you have the basement, where the work happens, both the metal work as well as the surgery work of the brothers, and then the middle layer which is the street and the house
where they live,
and the living space, and then the terrace being where the birds are kept in the cages. So right from the start, kind of thinking of just this how to bring out this very physical space, but which is also the different layers of the film also play out metaphorically in those layers. And but when I first started talking to Shaunak about this film, he had they'd already shot a lot, and he kind of referenced a book called The Peregrine, which is a wonderful study of a bird by a writer called J.A. Baker. And it was just the kind of meticulousness of observation, and so that kind of the patience of making the film, which I was lucky to be at the beginning, and I was unlucky not to be later. But it was kind of the patience that Shaunak and the whole team brought to looking at a city without, I mean, the image that Shaunak talks about is looking up, but it's also looking down.
Yes.
It's also
Yes.
So it's basically looking at the city not at eye level, but it's up or down. So that was a very new way of looking at the city for me.
Delhi is not exactly an unfamiliar city to you. You've filmed there quite a lot, haven't you? Yeah. So how did that, your familiarity with the city and what it is, did that inform this film in any way? The shooting of this film?
I mean, it's always taken me aback that every time I go with a different film, it's a different city. So every film has been such a different aspect of Delhi, and also with like as I was saying, with this film, you're really not looking high level.
Yes.
So you kind of and then after shooting this film, even in any city you go to, you're aware of the amount of that there's no distinction between nature and us. We are surrounded and we coexist without knowing it with so many species.
And for this coexistence, you need to be looking down and looking up. Yes. So, Shaunak, you've said quite emphatically earlier in interviews that this is not a, can you hear me? That this is not a nature film, that this is not a, it's not a film about the climate crisis. It's not a film about social issues. And yet, of course, as we just discussed, all these layers do percolate into your story. How and why would you say, can you share your thoughts on why you think it is important to not, we do tend to categorize documentary films, and why you think it's important to sort of break out of these categories and, claim that the film is not this,
Sure,
not this.
sure.
Almost reminds me of this neti, neti,
Neti,
we
neti.
say this, not
Right.
this. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, let me first emphatically clarify what I said. So, not so much about. So, what I usually speak about is when we began the film, I was more like, I think we were clear about what not to do, what were like the anti goalposts of the film, then what our targets were. So when Somo and the subsequent DPs came in, the first thing we would say is that we don't want to make a regular nature or a wildlife doc, nor do we want to make a straightforward socio-political observational verite documentary. Nor did we want to make, most of all, I did not want to make a kind of um, a sweet film about nice people doing good things, like a saccharine diabetic film about just niceness, because and there is a version of this film that is that. And the thing is that of course when you start by doing the neti neti thing of saying not this, then it, while it abstains somewhat from being those things, it also inevitably becomes them, because you try and make it in opposition. The reason for doing that initially was that those are very set grammars, and I mean, logistically speaking, we didn't have the experience nor the ambition. But philosophically, those are sort of familiar grammars of things that I wasn't so much interested in pursuing. So, in a way, what happens is that, and on a more zoomed out level, what happens is that we know that a lot of environmental discourse is often very pedantic and moralistic and didactic and holds the audiences by the by the collars and yells at them and says, feel bad or feel scared. And we know that that just doesn't work. The pamphleteering has probably done more disservice in environmental films than anything else. So in a way, the idea is to try and make the problem have depths or kinds of layers that it has not had, because it's not just, it's a conditional, it's a broader zeitgeist for us, right? And we have to give it that degree of lyricism, and it has to have a poetry, and it has to have a depth of or a substantial sense of meaning, imagistically, philosophically, and creatively. So what that meant, therefore, was in a way cordoning off some of the zones of familiarity. And all of this sounds a bit grandiose belatedly, but initially when we started, essentially we just kept saying nature doc nahi karna or straightforward film nahi karni, and we didn't really know what it would be, which is good because in a way uh, these things have to change radically during the shoot and during the edit. The material that Somo was initially shooting, that grammar, as I'm sure he'll speak about, sort of started morphing very radically after. So, and Somo, for instance, wasn't just a DP, but has been a very close interlocutor of the film in terms of cuts and like a variety of things. And I mean, we'd all attest to the fact that the film was very neuroplastic in a sense of constantly morphing as it should. And that was because we didn't have a kind of a clarion call or a slogan about what the film would be about. And therefore it kept sort of shape shifting.
Also in response to what you were encountering, and I'm sure.
Yes.
Isn't it? Yeah. Would you like to add to that in terms of what you felt you encountered there in both physically and emotionally, philosophically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I joined the project, Shaunak, Aman, and the others in his team had already been working for I think almost a year, right?
Yes.
So they had a huge wealth of footage that they'd already shot. And then we started this process of thinking what is the grammar of the film, which it's we're dealing with reality, but giving it a way of looking that is maybe taking more from fiction, and as Shaunak was saying, to give a sense of poetry, to give a sense of and so we started on that journey. but it was when Ben came on board after me. By that time, Shaunak and Ben had kind of thought of this idea of the pan, and how the pan kind of unravels, and within that shot there's a kind of an unveiling of something, of disconnect. So the first shot of starting at eye level, and within one shot of moving from a human point of view to the point of view of a rat, or from a human point of view to a snail. So this kind of play between the natural world and different having a different point of view, and the human point of view being connected with pans, I think that kind of really brought a new grammar. And then I think Riju, who came after Ben, and actually shot a lot of the film, took forward that. And but another thing which I would like to say is that when I watched the edit, I think it was in the edit that the grammar actually began to shine, because I couldn't even recognize the shots I had taken.
So,
because
because
Charlotte
there's
had.
such seamlessness to, given that 3 people have worked on it, there's incredible sort of seamlessness to the look of the film and how it's come together.
That's all actually, I would say, down to the masterly edit. I mean, Charlotte and our co-editor Vedant, Charlotte is a masterly editor, and she's got these monumental films like Act of Killing and Truffle Hunters and so on. And she has a kind of, like, I tend to be a very cerebral person in terms of thinking about the edit. So I usually go, what does this shot after this shot after this shot mean? Whereas for her, it's a kind of emotional edit from the gut. So she would talk about, no, but what does it feel like? And there's a kind of lightness of touch that I've never ever encountered in my life. And it made everything very seamless. And after a while, I had to focus to try and remember who shot what, and that was a skill of the kind of it's very like, it's a little like sculpting or clay modeling, where she puts together different structures every day and has a kind of playfulness about it, which I have never encountered before, and on any edit, actually. I mean, Somo is editing his film currently. So that kind of a light edit, like, it takes real skill and talent.
Thank you. I, of course, have many thoughts in my head, but we also would now like to open this conversation to our audience. Okay, so we request whoever would like to ask a question or say something to come to this mic, which is here. Yes, please.
Yeah, very good evening to both. It was very wonderful work. Just I wanted to know what kind of appreciation you got in your US tour when it was shortlisted for Academy. Some best appreciation during.
Did you hear that, Shaunak?
What kind of appreciation we got when we were shortlisted or nominated for the Oscars?
Yeah, which is the best industry persons there. I mean, our industry persons from US.
Oh, right. I understand. Okay. Well, there was a lot, actually. The thing is that, there's a thing before the Oscars called the nominees lunch, which is a month before the Oscars, actually. And there's no press involved, and you're in a room having lunch with all the nominees. So, and very often what happens is that if you're lucky, somebody ends up seeing the film. So I think the best conversation that I personally prized a lot were filmmakers that I look up to personally, who had seen the film and had kind things to say about it, like Darren Aronofsky, Cuarón, Colin Farrell, or others like Riz Ahmed, Dev Patel, Mark Duplass, Meera Nair. Yeah, I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody major, but I mean, this would largely be the kind of this thing. So, people say kind things about the cinematography or about the texture. So it's impossible to like put my finger on any one comment per se, but like those are nice to hear.
Yeah, just to add on, Madam told in that you don't want to call this also climate crisis movie, but it's alarming that shows it's a lot of climate crisis also. So whatever we request is going forward, it should be screened at every UN SDG or COP followed those things. So it should be open. That is my request. Thank you.
I would very gladly and trigger happily show it in all those places. I have no compunctions about calling it a climate change film now. All I meant was that I wanted to kind of sidestep the labels when we were making it because I didn't want to premeditate the form. That's it. But now, of course, the film has to do with anthropogenic climate change and global warming and all of that. So, of course, that's largely the wheelhouse of things.
It speaks to all these discourses, no?
Yes.
Even if they're not kind of fairly and squarely in it, it speaks to these discourses, the film. Yes.
All right. Hi. Thank you for the movie, first of all, and a very good evening to all of you. The first question I have is with regards to how did you get the brothers to be comfortable in front of the camera? Because normally these.
Sorry, may I request the camera person to pan towards the person because it's very faint, so it'll probably help me if I can
Oh,
see.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
How did you get the two brothers to be comfortable in front of the camera?
Because they seem very nonplussed. They don't seem a whole lot camera conscious when the focus is on them, and there are some pretty close shots of them as well. So how did that process go about? Like they were comfortable being sort of being caught on camera doing what they've been doing all this while.
Right. I think I got the this thing. Do you mean they were not nonplussed?
They were nonplussed. They weren't camera conscious, is what I meant.
They weren't camera conscious.
At least to me, yeah.
And what you mean is that they were not nonplussed, and
Yes.
I guess, and yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, well, the thing is, it's really, like the main thing that one has in one's toolkit is boredom. You have to put in the time and you have to wait for people to, you have to bore the daylights out of them, essentially, the characters. And in a way, the first month of shooting is often really trash, because characters are too self-conscious. And what you want is like characters being instead of behaving in front of the camera. And that only comes, it's like the first month is the rites of passage. And then slowly the camera and yourself becomes a kind of unobtrusive presence. Because over time you have to hit the sweet spot where they're aware of the camera, but yet very used to it. And only then this kind of quality of or texture of life, because the main ambition of this kind of creative nonfiction is a kind of passage of time that is soaked in a kind of banality or a kind of everyday quotidian mundaneness. And that only comes with a quality of, humdrum boredom. So you have to wait for that. And it's in that first month actually where you also figure out your own form. It took us actually a year to, I remember when Somo had first come, one of the first things that he had asked us, which totally stumped us on the first day, was, are you looking at or are you looking with? And we were all like scratching our heads and not sure of how to encounter that. But these are all questions that you kind of arm wrestle with through the making of that film. And in that kind of an initial period where you are figuring out your footing aesthetically and the characters are figuring out what to open up in front of you and what not to, is the point where you're reaching at a stage where material looks natural, whatever that word means. And remember, what they would say to us, or the levels of trust in year 1 is totally different from year 2, which is totally different from year 3. So the bit where Nadeem is talking about a kind of foundational dissatisfaction with life and what would his life mean if he died today, that level of access into one's kind of existential recesses, that was the last thing we ever shot with them at the end of year 3. I could not have gotten it in year 2 either. So in a way, it's a kind of changing uppy downy sort of a relationship. And it's like, it's a slow kind of dig. And you have to arrive at it. And it takes time and it takes a lot of effort.
Got it. And just that sort of segues into my second question, was the chronology of the film. Like, did you shoot it chronologically from your, and did you edit it that way as well? Or was it, what, there were some bits from the third year and then the first, and then.
Well, chronologically, only with the Indian bits of like a vague through line of the brothers' life. But with the animals, absolutely not. I mean, with the animals, it was all over the place, of course. And with the edit, emphatically not. With the edit, you tackle whatever section feels easiest. And then it's a ascending order of difficulty for me. Like I get to and even with Charlotte, like we went to Charlotte with a 3-hour long sprawling, unwatchable cut, and then she started sculpting it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't I don't edit chronologically at all.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Hi, Shaunak. I have two questions. In one of your interviews, I heard you say that there were 400 hours of footage. So I'm wondering, how was the edit really very brutal, and what is it that got left out?
Well, a lot got left out, of course. We shot for 3 hours, so 400 hours seems big, but not big compared to a lot of the. I mean, if you look at recent docs that have shot a lot, I don't know if 400 hours would be the highest by any stretch. Of course, it's brutal, but of course you have to tame the mountain by editing simultaneous to the shoot. So Vedant, our co-editor, for the last year, the last many months, like 6 months in India, he just sat and edited as we were shooting. So he kept putting together material and sequences as the shoot was ongoing. And only that gives you a kind of shape vaguely to it. And that's how we were able to bring it down to 3 hours. And after that, after that, it's really like, the tremendous cliche of killing your darlings. But more than killing your darlings, it's about a kind of broader shape or rhythm, like the intuitive cadence of the spine of an emotional arc, which you have to adhere to. Apart from that, I have no suitable answer actually to give for what we left out, because, I mean, just tons and tons of stuff, right? 5 films would have come out of this material. A full film would have come out with just the animals we shot, because we shot the animals very, very, very devotedly and prolifically. So just a lot of material.
My next quick question is, where do you get your impeccable diction and vocabulary from? I mean, it's just amazing. I mean,
firstly, I like the fact that we're doing all the questions in multiples of 2. I don't know. I suppose it's a large degree of rehearsal. I've now answered a ton of these questions, literally hundreds of times. So I suppose after a while, it's not that you know the answer by rote, but you sort of are able to sculpt and chisel it over endless conversations. So which is I was so excited about Somo also being here today to hear another person cogitate about the film.
Thanks, Shaunak. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes, it's wonderful that Somo was able to make it back in Bangalore before the screening. Yes.
And traveled an hour and a half to get here.
Yes, an hour and 45.
Yes, he made a point to say that to me too.
Hi, Shaunak. Hi, Somo. Firstly, it's a beautifully shot film. Secondly, I was sitting significantly far from the screen, and what took me to the basement or to the river or to the terrace was actually the audio, like you mentioned. So what exactly, how did you go about with, production mixing or like location sound recording and with the post?
Well, for the person who recorded our sound and did the design was this wonderfully talented person called Niladri, who we fondly call Nilu. So Nilu basically, like when you're shooting animals, the only time the image of the animal actually comes alive is with sound. And in this case, okay, let me answer this a bit structurally. In a way, the whole film is a movement from is a kind of waxing or waning of compression and decompression, right? We keep cutting between the basement, which is claustrophobic and very cramped and stifled, to the open skies of the city. So it's constant compression and decompression, a little like inhaling and exhaling, a little like breathing, right? And in a way that once you know that this is the structure, you can really lean into the audio strategies around this. So when we are in the basement, we know that the sound of like, or, like shifting of chairs, bristling of clothes, that kind of a thing really gives a sense of intimacy. So in the design, we leaned into that kind of a thing more. We dialed up those kinds of sounds because we knew when we were cutting to the long shots, that sense of release comes stronger where with a long shot of the sky, if you put the sound of wind or those kinds of things. So in a way, the sound allowed us to kind of like predicate the experience or the structure of the film throughout. Otherwise, in terms of recording, Neelu would have to contort himself into all kinds of shapes with a boom mic and so on. And of course, we had to do a lot of Foley because there's no way you can record the sound of the rats when they're scurrying about. So we did have to do a lot of Foley with somebody in Japan. And the mix actually is it's like, because the music often deploys the kind of electronic distortion that's undulating. So you often have to like ramp up certain things and dial down certain things. And more than the fidelity of the sound, I think it's about the emotional experience of it. I was also very lucky to get all the DPs who worked on the film, Somo, Ben, Riju, are all very interested in sound. So in a way, I actually learned a lot from the DPs, ironically, in terms of thinking about the sound while shooting, because sound cues, like, there's that bit where they're working in the basement and then the camera slides to these two workers who are talking about WWE, like some match between Undertaker and Mankind. That kind of a thing is a purely sound-based cue, right? And that kind of a thing came with Ben's extreme interest in the idea of the motivated camera, where he would say that, like with him, it was impossible to plan anything because he would say, sometimes the wind blows, sometimes the noises come, and the camera has to be motivated by it. So that kind of a thing really makes you home in on sound as a gradient. And that's how, but anyway, all of this sounds very neat and nice when you speak of it in postmortem. But of course, it was on the timeline, we had to wrestle with a lot of things and it took a lot of, and we did our mix in Copenhagen with somebody called Jacques, and all of that, like, it's all of these things together that amounts to something.
Hi, good evening. Two questions.
Of
Were
course.
there at any point of time any creative conflict among yourself or in your head? First question. Second is, how did you bring the spiritual or the philosophical part of the inside the entire content? How did you think about this to fit in?
Well, I think the two questions are connected in my head because it was really the spiritual or the philosophical bits that were the main bones of contention. Because the thing is that we had already, I don't know, when Somo and I did the initial schedules, it was gearing towards a kind of observational social real form. Then to try and make it like decant it a bit and put in the animals, the sense of the life writ large in the canvas of the city, and make it this kind of interiorized personal philosophy of Saud and Nadeem that actually reflects on climates and like human animal neighborliness or kinship, or to arrive essentially at a form where the form reflects the inner lives of the characters, by which I mean they have a kind of contemplative or meditative sense, where the form is able to reflect something of the content in the truest sense. That I think is the most troublesome thing. At times in the film it works, at sometimes I feel like it's a bit inconsistent, but that was the main kind of struggle. The access to the ideas itself is not tough because I was reading a lot. All of us are discussing and reading voraciously. And so I had a ready set of ideas that I wanted to dip into. It's about how one transliterates from the realm of the ideas to the realm of, all of that. So that's what the main challenge usually is.
So what's next? What comes next after such a iconic? I mean, like this is like wow. What's next?
Thank you. Well, the immediate thing that I'm very excited about, of course, is Somo's forthcoming film. I'm enjoying seeing him squirm while I talk about his forthcoming film. That uh, I can't wait for its rough cut to come. But no, I mean, jokes about the. I think I want to do fiction next, and I want to research and write something on my own. It has to be self-generated, I think. But right now, I have to decompress because the last 6 months have been very, very, very chaotic. So after some rest, I think I'll write a fiction piece.
You've created enough curiosity in us now about Somo's film. So you want to just tell us briefly about what
Shaunak is a
it?
co-producer.
Huh?
Shaunak is a co-producer. so-
Okay. तो ये आपसी मिली भगत है आपकी. Yes. So what's the
Oh.
film about?
No, that will have to.
Oh, that will have to wait. Okay.
We've been working on it for about 5 years. And,
Okay.
we just finished the shoot. Yeah.
Yes, there's somebody else waiting for.
Hello, Shaunak and Somo. First of all, I'm really thankful, and I'm sure I'm talking on behalf of all the audience here. It's been an incredible experience. Thank you for making this wonderful piece of art. My question is, as you were saying, right? First of all, it's when you're making non-fiction, you're in abstract territory and you don't know what will lead to what. Secondly, you're saying that you shot it over 3 years and 400 hours of footage. And thirdly, you're saying that this movie is not about, you cannot bucketize it into what that is about climate change or bird rescue, or it's a sweet saccharine movie about sweet brothers. So as a creator, right, like how do you know like where to stop? Because it's human journey, and like so much is happening in their life, and how do you know, okay, this is the point that I'm trying to stop? And I'm sure Somu also, from what you say just now, that he's shooting for 5 years, at least that's what I perceived from what you said. So how do the two of you know, as creators, know when to stop? Okay, this is where it ends and this is where my
When, I mean, the simplest answer is when the money is over. Because I mean, this is almost not a facetious answer, because with docs, what happens is that there's no closing point, right? You just keep on shooting, and it reaches a kind of critical mass of exhaustion. That's what happened with my last film, with Cities of Sleep. And because actually the thing with me is I usually know what the closing of the film is, but I'm terrified of the second act in the film. I'm like petrified of act 2. And I keep thinking that I need more material for that stuffing in the middle. So I keep shooting with in a kind of elliptical style that would be conducive for the second act of the film. And I wouldn't know where to end. In this case, actually, Charlotte's time is very precious, and we had to go to Copenhagen. And even then, actually, I sent the co-editor with the footage, Vedant, earlier, because I kept shooting till the end, till like for a good 3 weeks after he left. But no, I don't think it's you just, anybody who says I knew this is enough, I have deep suspicions about, because with docs, it's really, unless it's an event-based thing or it's a very personal story, it's very, 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 very difficult to tell. Often you're doing patch shoots also during the edit, and you do pickup shoots and so on. So it's a kind of ongoing sort of thing. I don't know. Somo, when did you stop shooting? Or how did you know?
Which for all the breeds, or well, with
When you got a
fiction-
bigger project?
with yeah, actually that was we truncated because of COVID, and then unfortunately I was working on something else when they resumed, so that's why I stopped. But the only reason why I stopped, otherwise I would have loved to be a part of it more. Yeah, but with fiction, it's actually the other way around. You write for 5 years and then you shoot in 17 days. So yeah.
Hi, Shaunak. Hi, Somo. It's really high. Okay. My name is Shruti. I had 2 questions. Sorry. One is, I was just curious about Salik and how come he was sort of part of this. What's his like backstory? And the second thing was, after Elephant Whisperers, there was a whole public debate about a documentary filmmaker's responsibility towards those that they document. I just wanted to know how did the brothers respond to the film, the people
Mhm.
around in that locality, and where are they at now? Like, what's Nadeem up to,
Sure,
studying
sure.
there, the hospital?
So Salik is their cousin. And Salik for us, in terms of the film's dramaturgical curve was imperative, right? Because he, when we started shooting, I realized that the brothers are they're like philosophers and all, but they don't flash a smile, So I would keep feeling like, gosh, they're so stoic and wry and serious. But with Salik, what happened is that he comes and he infuses the screen with a kind of like magnetic levity. And he became, and like bizarre things happen to him. The glasses get taken away from him, squirrels pop out, all of those things happen. So, and I realized that the audience, in terms of the spectatorial contract, is very ready to grant him laughter because he has a kind of almost this kind of unvarnished innocence in a way, and he serves as a very interesting kind of a counterpoint to the seriousness of the brothers. So he was and he's their cousin, he's always working there and so on. So it's like a very tight-knit sort of a group. In terms of the other question about like how much the characters are involved, the thing is, in this case, the brothers are very involved. Right from the shoot to the edit, even when we were editing in Copenhagen, we would keep shooting on our phone from the timeline of the edit sequences that we were shooting. Wherever they felt that there were questions of safety, etc., they would say, remove this, we would remove that. So in those things, they were like very robust interlocutors for the edit. Of course, one has to hold on to one's editorial autonomy because you don't want this is not an NGO film or a advertisement for their work. So you have to do this kind of a tightrope walk where you sensitively listen to them while holding on to some degree of editorial autonomy. And of course, they saw multiple cuts, opined, we did various screenings for the community, for their families, and so on. After that, the brothers have traveled with us extensively. At this point, Nadeem has gone to more festivals than I have, honestly. They came to Cannes, he came to New York for the release, he came to LA multiple times, is currently in Zurich or has just come back, came to the Oscars, all three of them. So they've been traveling with us a lot. I think it's important for filmmakers and subjects to be stakeholders in the representation of the film when it comes to these big ticket events. And therefore, it was imperative that they had to be there both in the physical premiere that was Cannes and, of course, at the Oscars. There's no question of them not being there. In terms of how the hospital is doing, it's doing slightly better, I imagine, because there's more media attention. There's some degree of donations, not enough though. And our producers have very kindly funded the hospital, given the hospital some money for the next 1 year, which is good because it concretely alleviates some of the hardships. But having said that, they live a very hard life. And I don't want to romanticize the film by saying that no film can in one fell swoop transform the life of a whole family. And I hope that it provides some kind of a oasis, but they lead a hard life. So now if you went to the hospital, it's slightly bigger and there's, I think, 1 or 2 more employees, but it's still not easy. They're still going through financial and emotional hardships. We're hoping that once the film properly releases finally in some OTT in India, there'll be more of an inflow of donations. There has been some, to be fair, but they could, of course, do with more. I hope everybody shares the trailer, everybody who's here.
Yes, in fact, I was just going to say that the sense of disquiet that you leave us with, in a sense, in the film, is very important because while there are these good things happening, that they've got the funds and the hospital has been set up and so on, but you can also see very clearly that it's hardly easy. And that struggle is, I guess, not going to get any easier, even if so that note that you strike, I felt personally was also
right. Well, the whole film is a kind of exploration of the kind of mysterious, cruel optimism of their lives about why they keep on doing what they do. And the last thing that we hear them say amongst themselves is, one of the brothers says that the hospital is built now, but the road is broken, and how will people ever get here? So, there's multiple levels of infrastructural, social, all kinds of things that keep sort of chipping away in their sense of stability. And you can't, I hope people don't, of course, there's a hugely redemptive and a hopeful and a resilient spirit because of them. But it was important for us that we don't leave people blinkered to just how tremendously difficult their lives are.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Shaunak, for making the time to talk to us today and sharing your thoughts so generously. And of course, thank you, Somo, for traveling all the way to come to the screening and sharing your thoughts generously. And thanks to everybody for coming to the screening. A very good evening to all.
Thank you. Thanks, Somo.